Have you ever wondered what happens when someone at the pinnacle of the tech world, a modern-day titan, suddenly finds themselves in the crosshairs of the world's most powerful investigative agency? This isn't just a hypothetical question. It's the beginning of a story that might just redefine what we think about power, ambition, and second chances. Stick around, because this one gets intense. And before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The New Mexico desert stretched out under a bruised purple sky, the kind of vast, silent landscape that makes you feel both infinitely small and part of something massive. It was against this epic backdrop that the twin rockets of StarTech Dynamics roared to life, tearing a fiery path into orbit. From the high-tech observation deck, Cameron "Cam" Rivers watched the flames burn away beneath the boosters. He was the mind behind this spectacle, the CEO, the visionary. The roar, the brilliant flash that determined upward trajectory against the fading twilight. For Cam, it was more than just a launch. It was a ritual that always rewrote his personal sense of what was possible. He took a deep breath, inhaling the dry, dust-heavy air of the launch site. It was the smell of progress, of ambition made real. But tonight, that familiar scent was mingled with something else, a faint note of anxiety. His thoughts drifted to his friend, his mentor, his rival. Alex, Elon Marsden. It was Alex who had first shown him the intoxicating dance of genius and audacity. But it was also Alex's shadow that Cam had been trying to escape his entire career. He had built StarTech Dynamics not just to reach for the stars, but to prove he could build an empire on his own terms, with his own rules. But rules, as Cam was about to learn, have a way of catching up with you. The successful launch should have been a moment of pure triumph. The company's stock would soar, new contracts would pour in, and his legacy would be further cemented. Yet a knot of dread was tightening in his stomach. He'd received a call just an hour before the launch. A sterile official voice on the other end, identifying himself as Special Agent Thorne from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The words were polite but carried the weight of a guillotine. "Mr. Rivers, we need to speak with you. It's a matter of national security." National security. The two words every tech CEO dreads. It could mean anything from a data breach to corporate espionage or something far, far worse. As Cam watched his rocket become a disappearing star, he couldn't shake the feeling that his own world was about to come crashing down. He had pushed the boundaries of technology, but had he pushed the boundaries of the law too far? The line had always been blurry in his world, a world where innovation often outpaced regulation. He had taken risks, calculated risks, he always told himself. But had he miscalculated this time? The drive back from the launch site felt different. The familiar desert roads, usually a space for clear-headed thinking, now felt like a closing trap. Every pair of headlights in his rearview mirror sparked a jolt of paranoia. Was that them? Were they following him? He ran through a mental checklist of every project, every deal, every shortcut he'd ever taken. Was it the encrypted satellite network he'd deployed without full clearance? The advanced AI algorithms that some critics called dangerously autonomous? Or was it something from his past, a ghost from his early days with Alex Marsden coming back to haunt him? Back in his sprawling, minimalist mansion overlooking the city lights, the silence was deafening. He poured himself a glass of water, his hand trembling slightly. This was the part of the CEO life they'd done to show you in the magazines. The crushing weight of responsibility, the isolation at the top. He thought about the question he often asked new recruits. What is one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough? For him, it had always been the vision, the relentless pursuit of the next frontier. But what do you do when the very thing that pushes you forward might also be the thing that pushes you over the edge? The next morning, two black sedans pulled silently into his driveway. Agent Thorne was exactly as his voice had suggested, tall, sharp, and utterly unreadable. He and his partner didn't waste time with pleasantries. They sat across from Cam in his own living room, the beautiful view of the valley suddenly feeling like a mockery. "Mr. Rivers," Thorne began, his eyes scanning the room, We have reason to believe that a proprietary technology developed by StarTech has fallen into the wrong hands. Cam's heart pounded. What technology? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Thorne slid a tablet across the polished concrete table. On the screen was a schematic, a design so advanced, so secret, that only a handful of people in his company had ever seen it. It was codenamed Prometheus, a revolutionary energy source with the potential to power entire cities or, in the wrong hands, to become a weapon of unimaginable power. We believe it was leaked from inside your company, Thorne stated, his gaze locking onto Cam's. And our investigation has led us to you. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was impossible. He had personally overseen Prometheus's security. The protocols were airtight. And yet, here was the proof. His life's work, the pinnacle of his achievements, was now the subject of a federal investigation that pointed directly at him. He was no longer the master of his universe. He was a suspect. He thought about his team, his investors, the thousands of people whose jobs depended on him. He thought about his legacy, now tarnished before it was even fully built. The agents left, but their presence lingered. Cam was cornered. If he fought the FBI head-on, his company would be torn apart by the investigation, whether he was innocent or not. The media would have a field day. If he cooperated, he risked implicating himself in a conspiracy he didn't understand. He felt trapped, a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. For the first time in his life, Cam Rivers, the man who launched rockets, had no clear trajectory. He was adrift. That night, unable to sleep, he found himself in his workshop, the place where ideas became reality. He looked at the prototypes, the models, the blueprints of his dreams. He had always believed that technology was the answer, the solution to humanity's greatest problems. But now, it was the source of his greatest crisis. Was he the hero who brought fire to mankind, or the fool who got burned? He realized he had two choices. He could let the system crush him, or he could do what he did best, innovate his way out. He couldn't fight the FBI's power, but he could outsmart the real culprit. He had to find the source of the leak himself. This was no longer about saving his company or his reputation. This was about clearing his name and reclaiming his future. It was a new kind of launch, not into space, but into the dark, hidden networks of his own organization. He would have to become a detective, a spy in his own empire, trusting no one. This is where the story truly begins. A man who had everything to lose decides to risk it all, not for fame or fortune, but for the truth. He would use his own genius, the very intellect that put him in this mess, to uncover a conspiracy that went deeper than he could ever imagine. It's a journey that would force him to confront his past, question his friendships, and ultimately, rediscover the very reason he started reaching for the stars in the first place. This wasn't just about a legal battle. It was about a new beginning. So, what do you think drives someone in a situation like this? Is it pride, a sense of justice, or just pure survival instinct? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and think about this for yourself. What's the one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough? Your answer might reveal more about you than you think. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video for the next chapter of this story. Stay curious. Have you ever wondered what it takes to change the world? Is it genius? Is it ambition? Or is it something more? Something born from the quiet moments of an ordinary life? Today, we're diving into the story of a man who embodies all of that. A figure no less audacious than the ones you see in headlines, Elon Musk. His story doesn't begin in a high-tech lab or a venture capital boardroom. It starts in a small, unassuming town in Pennsylvania. Imagine this: a father, a mechanic with grease-stained hands, teaching his son the intricate dance of gears and engines by tinkering with old cars. This wasn't just about fixing things. It was about understanding how systems work, how every small part contributes to a greater whole. This was Elon's first classroom. Then there was his mother, a schoolteacher with a quiet strength. She believed that a well-structured mind was just as important as a well-built engine. Every single weekend she'd have him write essays. For a boy whose mind was already racing towards the stars, this felt like an anchor. But these essays weren't punishment. They were lessons in disguise, teaching him the discipline to organize his chaotic thoughts, to see the beauty and power in structure. It was in these essays that the seeds of his grandest designs were first planted, not in code, but in prose. And you can't talk about Elon's early life without mentioning his sister Jenna. 5 years younger, she was his shadow and his protector. While other teenagers were out at parties, Elon was in the family garage, a solitary figure illuminated by the glow of a soldering iron, meticulously connecting circuit boards. It was Jenna who would bring him a sandwich, who would fend off their parents' concerns, who understood perhaps better than anyone the fire in her brother's eyes. She was the one who saw the future genius when everyone else just saw a strange kid in a garage. This upbringing created a powerful tension within Elon. He was a man pulled in two completely different directions. On one side, there was the undeniable comfort of home, the predictable, safe rhythm of family dinners, the rich aroma of his mother's Sunday roast filling the house, and the sound of Jenna's laughter, a sound that could ground him no matter how far his mind had traveled. This was the world of love, of belonging, of human connection in its purest form. But on the other side, there was an unstoppable force, a relentless pull towards the unknown. His mind wasn't content with the familiar comforts of his small town. It soared. It journeyed to the red plains of Mars. It explored the infinite possibilities of artificial intelligence, and it dared to dream of completely rewriting the definition of what it means to be human. He wasn't just thinking about the future, he wanted to build it with his own two hands. The safety of home versus the siren call of the cosmos. The warmth of his sister's laughter versus the cold, silent vacuum of space. For years, he lived in this state of internal conflict. But for a mind like Elon Marsden's, standing still is impossible. A choice had to be made. The pull of the future, the burning desire to turn his visions into reality, became too strong to ignore. He had to choose between the world he knew and the one he was determined to create. And so, he chose the latter. At just 20 years old, with his life savings packed in a bag, and carrying the immense weight of his family's trust on his shoulders, Elon Marsden left Pennsylvania. He didn't just move. He launched himself towards the epicenter of innovation, Silicon Valley. He was betting everything, his money, his family's faith, his entire future, on one single radical idea. An idea so bold, so revolutionary, it sounded like science fiction. He called it Neuralink X. A company with a mission that was as simple to state as it was complex to achieve, to build a bridge between the human brain and the machine, to connect our thoughts directly to the digital world. This wasn't just another tech startup. It was a quest to unlock the next stage of human evolution. He wasn't just leaving home. He was embarking on a journey to redefine home for all of humanity. The garage in Pennsylvania was replaced by a sterile lab in California. The smell of his mother's cooking was replaced by the scent of ozone and burning circuits. The supportive presence of his sister was replaced by the skeptical gazes of investors and the fierce competition of the valley. The stakes were no longer about getting a good grade on an essay. They were about the very future of our species. Elon Marsden's journey is a powerful reminder that the people who change the world often come from the most ordinary of places. Their greatness is forged not just in moments of brilliant insight, but in the quiet discipline learned at a kitchen table, in the unconditional support of a loving family, and in the difficult choice to leave it all behind in pursuit of an impossible dream. The story of Neuralink X is just beginning, but its roots run deep into the soil of a small Pennsylvania town, nurtured by a mechanic's hands and a teacher's heart. What do you think? Is this kind of sacrifice necessary for greatness? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the visionaries shaping our future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Back in the early days, Elon Musk wasn't the titan of industry we know today. He was just a guy with a radical idea, living in a shared house with 3 other entrepreneurs. One of them, Cam Rivers, was his rock. If Elon was the wild storm of ideas, Cam was the steady anchor who mapped the route, making sure they weren't just jumping off a cliff into the unknown. Their lives were a blur of late nights, fueled by caffeine, ambition, and an ever-growing pile of pizza boxes. Jenna, his girlfriend at the time, was his connection to the real world. She'd visit on weekends, armed with homemade brownies and a dose of reality. "Eat something real, Elon," she'd say, punching him lightly on the shoulder. He'd laugh, but her words carried weight. He knew he was drifting, chasing distant stars while she tried to keep him grounded on Earth. He could feel the growing distance between them, a quiet ache beneath the thrill of creation. The journey of what was then called Neuralinks was anything but smooth. It was a classic startup struggle. They pivoted constantly, chasing the right product for the right market. Enthusiastic investors who once saw the vision would get cold feet and pull out. Through it all, Elon slept on a couch in that shared house. He dreamed of better neural interfaces and clung to his hope like it was a lifeline, the only thing keeping him afloat in a sea of doubt. Then came the breakthrough. Their first prototype. It was a device that allowed a paralyzed person to move a cursor on a screen just by thinking. That night, he and Cam celebrated under the neon lights of their loft, a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. Jenna video-called from home, her eyes shining with pride. For a moment, it felt like all the sacrifice, all the sleepless nights had been worth it. The future seemed limitless, but success is a double-edged sword. As the company grew, so did the pressure. Investors, once hesitant, now demanded faster growth. Government regulators started knocking on their door, asking tough questions. The relentless pace started to cause fractures in his personal life. Jenna, once a weekend staple, became a distant note on his packed calendar. The friends from the loft, his founding tribe, began to scatter. Cam, his anchor, eventually moved on to his own ventures. Elon found himself in a strange paradox. He felt exalted, celebrated by the world, but more isolated than ever before. He told himself the sacrifice was necessary. The world needed his device, he reasoned. This was bigger than his personal relationships, bigger than his own happiness. He was building the future, and that required a toll. He just hadn't realized how high that toll would be. The ultimate price came one winter. His mother passed away unexpectedly. He was in Tokyo, deep in negotiations for a crucial deal. He missed her funeral. It was a wound that never truly healed. Jenna never fully forgave him for that, though her love for him remained, buried under layers of hurt and disappointment. He had gained the world's attention, but lost the unwavering support of those who knew him best. Eventually, Neuralink X rebranded, becoming StarTech Dynamics, and its focus shifted from the human mind to the vast expanse of space logistics. Elon's ambition, already stratospheric, reached for new heights. He was no longer just connecting brains. He was connecting worlds. The scale of his vision was breathtaking, and that brings us to that evening, standing on a launch pad in the middle of the desert. The wind whipped at his coat as he addressed his team, a sea of eager faces looking up at him. The rocket loomed behind them, a monument to his relentless drive. He looked out at the crowd at the culmination of years of work and felt a surge of triumph. The applause washed over him, loud and thunderous, but inside something was wrong. The applause rang hollow. The cheers felt distant. In that moment of ultimate success, a profound emptiness settled in his chest. He realized he had achieved his dream, the very thing he'd sacrificed everything for. Yet in the process, he had lost something quietly precious, something irreplaceable. Jenna's visits had become rare memories. Cam's texts went unanswered, not out of malice, but because their worlds had drifted too far apart. The booming success, the magazine covers, the global fame, it all served as a mask for a creeping, profound loneliness. He stood there, a king on his newly built throne, but the castle felt empty. He had conquered the stars but found himself utterly alone in his own universe. It's a powerful reminder that the pursuit of great ambition often comes with a hidden cost. The things we gain can sometimes be overshadowed by what we lose along the way. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, Please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the lives of the world's most influential figures. We'll see you in the next one. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a crisp autumn morning in Washington, D.C., and the doorbell of Elon's townhouse rang. Standing on the other side were two men in dark suits, their badges gleaming in polished leather cases. This wasn't a friendly visit, not a celebration. This was an investigation. The words they spoke sent a jolt straight through his chest. Federal Investigation Bureau. The recognition in his gut was immediate and sickening. Elon, the man who had always been chasing the vastness of outer space, now found himself utterly grounded. Not by a lack of fuel, not by some technical failure, but by suspicion. The agent started talking. International back channels, data leaks, grave national security concerns. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The agency wanted his cooperation. The agency wanted access to his company. The agency wanted answers, and they wanted them now. His mind began to race, flickering through 100 worst-case scenarios. Could this be it? Could this be the event that derails everything he's ever worked for? Could this destroy the entire world he had so meticulously built from the ground up? He could feel his pulse quicken, the rhythmic thumping echoing the frantic beat of his thoughts. The world was watching his every move, but now, so were they. Cam, his trusted partner, was away on a business trip. Elon made the call, his voice strained. Cam didn't hesitate, immediately dropping everything to rush back. Then, another text was sent, short and urgent, to the one person he knew he could count on, no matter what. "I need you." Jenna, wherever she was, got the message. She arrived that same evening. As she stepped out of her car in the driveway, her eyes, so often hardened by years of disappointment, were now softened by a deep, undeniable worry. Back inside, the agent sat in the living room. The lights felt unnaturally bright, casting sharp shadows across their stoic faces. The air was thick and still, charged with unspoken accusations. For the first time, Elon felt the cramped, suffocating weight of immediate, tangible danger. It was no longer a theoretical risk on a launch pad thousands of miles away. It was right here, in his home. His thoughts spiraled. What if someone behind the scenes, someone he trusted, pulled a lever and sent his rockets plummeting into the sea? What if the company, his life's work, collapsed under the weight of this investigation? What if he looked up for support, only to find no one standing by his side? This moment, this crisis, wasn't just an obstacle. It was a crucible. This story, right here, might just be the spark for a completely new beginning. It forces us to ask a profound question. What is the one thing that always pushes you forward, even when everything seems to be falling apart? For Elon, the answer was surprisingly simple, yet incredibly powerful. It was the fear of letting people down, not the fear of failure itself. He'd faced failure before, embraced it even as a stepping stone to success. But the thought of disappointing his sister, his dedicated team, of betraying his own self-worth, that to him was a terror far greater than any federal investigation. He had built his empire on dreams and defiance, but now he had to anchor it with trust and resilience. The men in suits saw a target, a problem to be contained. But they didn't see the fire inside him, a fire fueled not by ambition alone, but by a profound sense of responsibility to the people who believed in him. As the evening wore on, the questions became more pointed, the scrutiny more intense. They probed his connections, his communications, his motives. Every word was a potential trap, but as he answered, a strange sense of clarity began to emerge from the chaos. He realized that this wasn't just about protecting his company. It was about protecting his vision, the very reason he started this journey. He looked over at Jenna, her presence a silent testament to unwavering loyalty. He thought of Cam, racing back to stand with him. He thought of the thousands of engineers, technicians, and dreamers who had poured their lives into this shared goal. He was not alone. The fear of letting them down transformed, solidifying into a powerful resolve. This investigation wouldn't be the end. It couldn't be. It would be a trial by fire, a test of his leadership, his integrity, and his ability to navigate the treacherous currents of power and politics. The rockets might be grounded for now, but the dream of reaching the stars was more alive than ever. It was in that room, in the face of adversity, that the true mission began, to prove that even when the world tries to pull you down, the human spirit, fueled by loyalty and a fear of letting others down, can still find a way to soar. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content that explores the human side of ambition and innovation. We'd love to have you as part of our community. The crisp October air bit at the collar of his jacket as Elon Musk stepped out of the secure SUV at the federal building. The glass towers reflected the early morning light like 1,000 watchful eyes. He instinctively checked his phone, a small comfort in a world suddenly spinning off its axis. A message glowed on the screen from Cam Rivers, his former co-founder and lifelong partner in risk. "We're here, together." He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It was a small anchor in a turbulent sea. Inside, the lobby was all polished marble and hushed efficiency. Two agents, polite but firm, led him down a labyrinth of corridors. The plush carpet muffled their footsteps, a stark contrast to the clanging industrial symphony of his launch sites. He looked up, catching the silent, blinking red lights of security cameras. It was a chilling realization. He was no longer Elon Musk, the visionary, the master of his zero-gravity universe of possibilities. Here, he was simply a subject to investigation. The initial interrogations felt almost like a corporate negotiation. They were polite, even friendly at times. But beneath the calm surface, there was steel. They asked about overseas deals, about encrypted data transfers, about a classified project his company, StarTech Dynamics, had quietly initiated under the codename Icarus. Each question was a precision strike, chipping away at the armor of his confidence. He had always operated on a simple, powerful principle: innovation first, red tape later. Now that red tape felt like it was tightening around his throat. He remembered the early days with Cam, sketching rocket designs on coffee-stained napkins in a tiny garage. They dreamed of touching the stars, of building a future where humanity wasn't bound by Earth. They believed technology could solve anything. But this wasn't a physics problem. It wasn't an engineering challenge you could solve with a better algorithm or a stronger alloy. This was about perception, politics, and power. The very systems he'd sought to bypass were now poised to dismantle everything he'd built. He sat across from Agent Miller, a woman whose calm demeanor was more unsettling than any overt threat. "Mr. Marsden," she said, her voice even, "we have records of unusual energy signatures originating from a remote facility in the Nevada desert, a facility registered to a shell corporation that traces back to StarTech." He kept his face a mask of detached curiosity, but his heart hammered against his ribs. He knew exactly what she was talking about. Project Icarus wasn't just about faster satellites or cleaner energy. It was something more, something paradigm-shifting, and something, he now realized, dangerously close to a line he never saw. He parried their questions with the same intellectual agility he used in boardrooms. He deflected, reframed, and spoke of theoretical applications and R&D dead ends. But he could see in their eyes they weren't buying it. They had pieces of the puzzle, and they were patiently waiting for him to provide the rest. For a man who lived his life 10 steps ahead, he was suddenly trapped in the present, each second stretching into an eternity, under the sterile, fluorescent lights of the interrogation room. As the day wore on, the friendly facade began to crack. The questions became more pointed, the implications more severe. They mentioned national security, foreign adversaries, and unauthorized technological proliferation. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. He looked at the file on the table between them. His name was on the cover, stark and official. This wasn't just a business audit. It was a character assassination in progress. The world he knew, of launch windows, thrust-to-weight ratios, and shareholder value, was dissolving, replaced by a shadowy landscape of suspicion and accusation. He thought of his team, the brilliant engineers and scientists who poured their lives into StarTech, They believed in the mission. They believed in him. Had he led them all down a path to ruin? The weight of that responsibility was heavier than any rocket he had ever launched. He had always been the one with the answers, the one who could see the trajectory through the chaos. But now, for the first time, he was flying blind. The very ambition that had propelled him to unprecedented heights was now the engine of his potential downfall. And so, the turning point began to crystallize in the sterile air of that room. He had rockets waiting to be launched, global board meetings to chair, and engineering teams counting on his guidance. But now, he also had a dossier with his name at the top, the focused interest of a powerful agency, and a blinding global spotlight. He closed his eyes for just a moment, picturing the vast, silent expanse of space. Then he heard Jenna, his legal counsel, clearing her throat beside him. He felt Cam's hand on his back, a silent, steady pressure. He opened his eyes and realized with a sudden gut-wrenching clarity, this was not just business anymore. This was deeply, irrevocably personal. He straightened his shoulders and pushed his chair back slightly, the legs scraping against the floor. The sound was loud in the silence. He met Agent Miller's gaze. "I'll cooperate," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, though his insides roiled like a turbulent storm. He took a breath. "But I'm not just handing over my company." He tried to smile, a flicker of his old confidence, an attempt to convince himself as much as the agents. He had no idea what journey lay ahead, what trials he would face. But in that moment he felt terrifyingly, thrillingly alive. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt something that wasn't engineered, calculated, or optimized. He felt vulnerability, and in that vulnerability, a new kind of strength began to take root. The fight for his legacy had just begun. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the story of Elon Marsden. If you were captivated by this journey and want to find out what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have so much more of this story to explore together. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think will happen. We love hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. The agent slid a piece of paper across the cold metal table. A server log. Encrypted communications. A flash of text that seemed to point a damning finger at a foreign power. My pulse hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I recognized some of it. Fragments of code from my private test network, an early prototype for Neuralink X. To me, it was just research, a passion project. But to them, sitting across from me with faces carved from stone, it looked like espionage. I tried to explain. My voice sounded thin, reedy. This research, it's purely humanitarian, I stammered. It's aimed at restoring limb functions for people in war-torn zones. I looked at their blank expressions. They weren't buying it. The air conditioning hummed, but sweat trickled down my spine. Jenna was beside me, her arms crossed, her jaw set in a line of fierce defiance. Cam, my ever-loyal COO, observed from the corner, his mind working, processing every detail. I had 3 choices: fight, negotiate, or fold. I looked at Jenna, at the belief in her eyes, and I knew. I had to fight. Back at StarTech headquarters that afternoon, the sterile quiet of the interrogation room was replaced by a frantic energy. Cam pulled me into my office, his voice a low, urgent hum. "We'll get ahead of this," he promised. And we did. We gathered the engineering leads, pulling them from their projects. We called meetings that ran late into the night, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of purpose. We documented everything, every line of code, every email, every conversation related to the project. We started internal audits, turning our own company inside out to prove there was nothing to hide. We made a plan: cooperate fully, but also be radically transparent. We would publish reports for the public to see. That evening, as the city lights began to twinkle outside my office window, Jenna came in. The frantic energy of the day had left me drained, hollowed out. She just stood there for a moment, then said, "You're doing the right thing, Elon." I looked up, and her eyes held something I hadn't seen in years, something I thought I'd lost. It was faith, unwavering faith in me. In that moment, a powerful surge of hope washed over me, pushing back the shadows of fear. We could beat this. We had to. With renewed conviction, we launched our counteroffensive, not with lawyers and denials, but with honesty. We released a public statement. It was bold, direct. StarTech Dynamics pledges full cooperation with federal investigators, it read. But we didn't stop there. In parallel, the statement continued, we are launching a new initiative, Project Phoenix, to give open, auditable access to our research network to accredited third-party oversight committees. We were throwing open the doors, inviting the world to look. Let them see we had nothing to hide. Let them see the humanitarian heart of our work. The media narrative, which had been a firestorm of accusation, began to shift. It was subtle at first, a change in tone, a different choice of words. Tech visionary under fire slowly became tech visionary under scrutiny but taking action. The tide, it seemed, was turning. The phone calls from panicked investors slowed down. Supportive messages started trickling in from the research community. For the first time in days, I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to believe that truth and transparency might actually win. We were on the right path, but our fragile hope was shattered in an instant. The leak, someone, a ghost within our own walls or a viper within the agency, leaked a backup file directly to the press. I woke up to my phone buzzing incessantly, a hornet's nest of notifications. The headlines were brutal, screaming from every news site. Data leak at StarTech Dynamics, the foreign connections revealed. It was a nightmare. The file contained carefully selected parts of the brain-machine interface code stripped of all context. Worse, it included a signed contract with a small, little-known research entity overseas, an organization we'd partnered with for on-the-ground trials. I watched in horror as my Twitter feed exploded into a digital mob. Regulators, smelling blood in the water, demanded emergency hearings. Our stock, which had started to stabilize, plummeted in pre-market trading. The investors, who had been cautiously optimistic, were now in a full-blown panic. Every bit of ground we had gained through transparency was wiped out overnight by a single, malicious act. The carefully constructed narrative of cooperation was replaced by a simpler, more damning one. Guilt. The leak wasn't just a setback. It was a targeted strike designed to finish us. And as I stared at the screen, the weight of it all felt crushing. We weren't just fighting a legal battle anymore. We were fighting for the very survival of StarTech, and my name was being dragged through the mud right along with it. The fight was far from over. It had just entered a darker, more treacherous phase. Thank you for watching. It's your support that keeps this story going. If you're invested in seeing what happens next, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. See you next time. Late at night, the lab hummed. It was a familiar sound, the pulse of the servers, the lifeblood of his creation. But tonight, it felt different, louder, almost accusatory. Elon stood alone, the cool blue light from the server racks carving sharp lines across his face. His hands, usually so steady, were clenched into tight fists. He could almost hear Jenna's voice from her last voicemail, the worry etched into her words. Call me, please. His chest tightened. It wasn't just Jenna. The board was demanding his immediate presence. The world was closing in. Just then, Cam shuffled in, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. A loyal friend, a brilliant engineer, always there. We're still okay, Cam said. But the usual confidence in his voice was gone, replaced by a tremor he couldn't hide. In that moment, any lingering hope Elon had clung to simply evaporated into the chilled, recycled air of the server room. The foundation he'd built, bite by bite, was cracking. The next morning felt like a public execution. Elon stood at a podium, facing a sea of reporters. The lights were blinding, the flashbulbs popping like miniature explosions. He answered their questions, a barrage of accusations disguised as inquiries: national security, data sovereignty, foreign espionage. He could feel the weight of millions of eyes on him, the entire world watching, judging. He forced a smile, a mask of control, but inside, he was fragmenting. He saw Cam and Jenna standing behind him, their support a visible but distant comfort. It hit him then. With the force of a rocket launch gone wrong, this battle wasn't just about code or satellites anymore. This could cost him everything. An old memory surfaced, unbidden. A desert launch pad at dusk, the fiery plume of a rocket ascending, a beautiful defiant streak against the darkening sky, a symbol of pure ambition. Could he reclaim that fire now? Now that his own company was under siege, his integrity questioned? Could he reclaim the trust he'd let erode with his sister, with his friends? The stakes weren't just about the company's future or the mission to the stars. This was about him, his identity. Who was Elon without the company he'd bled for? The investigation deepened, becoming more invasive with each passing day. Agents in sharp suits, their faces unreadable, requested access to his most private spaces. His lab, the sanctuary where ideas were born. His personal communications, every text, every email. His travel logs mapping out his life in a series of sterile entries. He felt exposed, stripped bare. The very launch towers that once represented freedom and possibility now felt like the bars of a cage, trapping him. Sleep offered no escape. He'd toss and turn, haunted by visions. Jenna's disappointed face, a reflection of his own failure. Cam's quiet, simmering frustration. The news headlines flickering across his mind's eye like broken lines of code on a corrupted screen. Betrayal, scandal, collapse. The words repeated, a relentless digital mantra of his downfall. But then slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. As the external machine of crisis management churned on, Elon started to tune it out. He began to look inward. He disconnected. One Sunday, he found himself back in the place where it all began. The old garage. The sacred ground where he and Cam had pieced together their first prototype, fueled by cheap pizza and impossible dreams. No phone, no screens, just the smell of dust and old oil, and the ghosts of their younger selves. He was tracing the cold lines of an old circuit board when the garage door creaked open. It was Jenna. She didn't say much. She just sat down on an old stool beside him, the silence comfortable, familiar. "You don't have to do this alone," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the noise in his head. Her words were a lifeline. He looked around at the relics of his past, the soldering irons, the tangled wires, the faded blueprints. A deeper memory surfaced, one he hadn't accessed in years. His father's workshop. The warmth of the single bare bulb, the comforting smell of grease, the feeling of his father's calloused, capable hand guiding his own. The simple, profound joy of building something real, together. It wasn't about the valuation or the stock price. It was about connection, about creating something tangible from nothing. In the quiet of that garage, surrounded by the echoes of his past, Elon understood. The relentless pursuit of the future had made him forget the lessons of his origin. He had been so focused on building a machine to reach the stars that he'd forgotten how to be human. He had to rebuild not just his company but himself, and this time he wouldn't do it alone. The path forward was unclear, fraught with risk. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of that old flame. Not the fire of a rocket, but the steady, quiet warmth of a pilot light, waiting to be reignited. The journey back wouldn't be easy, but it would be real. It would be his. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. See you in the next video. Scene opens, dramatic but hopeful music playing softly underneath. He stood there surrounded by the ghosts of past triumphs and the looming shadow of potential failure. And in that quiet moment, a profound realization washed over him. It wasn't just success he missed or the thrill of innovation. It was connection. It was trust. The very human elements he'd sacrificed at the altar of ambition. Just then, the garage door creaked open. Cam walked in, a peace offering of 2 steaming mugs of coffee. No words were exchanged. They didn't need any. They sat in the comfortable silence, soon joined by Jenna. The 3 of them, a small constellation of support against a universe of doubt. Outside, the storm of the investigation raged on, The public remained skeptical. Their trust eroded. The company he had built from the ground up was teetering on the brink. But inside that garage, amidst the wires and prototypes, they found a fragile piece. An eye in the hurricane. It was in that quiet space that a new idea took root in Elon's mind. Not an idea for a rocket or a new piece of tech, but a plan. A bold, audacious piece of disclosure. He decided he would face the crisis head-on, not by hiding, not by issuing carefully worded press releases, but by throwing the doors wide open. He would host a live demonstration of their interface. He'd open up the metrics for everyone to see. He would personally invite regulators, third-party experts, even the most critical journalists to observe and scrutinize their work. He would transform this crisis from a bunker into a stage. He called it open orbit. The announcement sent shockwaves through the tech world. In 1 week, StarTech Dynamics, the embattled giant, would publicly test its prototype with completely independent oversight. It was a gamble of epic proportions, a move so transparent it bordered on reckless. But it worked. A flicker of hope ignited in the darkness. Investors who had been scrambling for the exits paused. The media, which had been baying for blood, leaned in with genuine curiosity. Even the regulators, so often seen as adversaries, agreed to attend. The gears of public opinion began to shift ever so slightly. For a fleeting moment, Elon felt that familiar flame, the one that had propelled him to such great heights, ascend once more. But this feeling was different. It wasn't just the thrill of the launch. It was the quiet determination of a leader ready for the fight. He knew with absolute certainty that the biggest test was still ahead. This demonstration wouldn't be a pre-recorded polished marketing video. It would be live. Every potential glitch, every software bug, every single error would be broadcast to the world in real time. Every question from the audience would be raw and unfiltered. The entire world would be watching. If he failed now, the fall wouldn't just be a setback. It would be a cataclysm, a collapse steeper and more brutal than any rocket explosion he had ever witnessed. The stakes had never, ever been higher. And so, he prepared. The garage, once a sanctuary of peace, became a war room. Long nights bled into early mornings, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of purpose. The lab buzzed with an intensity that rivaled the final countdown of a launch. Jenna, with her sharp, methodical mind, took charge of logistics. Her experience managing complex projects at a nonprofit proved invaluable, turning a chaotic vision into an actionable plan. She coordinated with the venue, the independent experts, and the security teams, ensuring every detail was accounted for. Cam, meanwhile, handled the media strategy. He was the bridge to the outside world, managing the narrative, fielding a relentless barrage of inquiries, and crafting the message that would frame the open orbit event. He worked to turn the media's skepticism into intrigued anticipation. And Elon? Elon was the heart of the operation. He wrote the script, not as a CEO, but as a storyteller. He designed the demonstration, ensuring it was not just technically impressive but also understandable and compelling. He rehearsed the narrative over and over, not to memorize lines, but to internalize the story of their comeback. He confronted his deepest fear, the fear of letting people down, of failing those who believed in him, and he channeled that fear, transforming it from a paralyzing force into a powerful fuel. The investigation still loomed. The whispers about the leak still simmered in the background. But now, he had a path forward. The rocket of his career, which had been turned into a missile of public scrutiny aimed directly at him, was being redirected. He was turning it into a beacon of transparency, of accountability, of a new way of doing things. He was no longer just the visionary chasing Mars, the detached genius living in the future. He was a leader, standing firmly in the present, under fire and unbowed. And for the first time, he understood that what truly mattered, what would ultimately decide his fate, wasn't the hardware, the code, or the rockets. It was his heart. Thank you so much for watching. This story is just getting started, and the open orbit event is going to be a moment you wouldn't want to miss. If you're invested in this journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got a lot more to share. See you in the next one. The day of the open orbit demonstration dawned clear and cold. Silver clouds drifted over the launch site as the first light of dawn crept across the desert floor. Inside the control dome of StarTech Dynamics, it was a hive of controlled chaos. Engineers, looking like a futuristic mission control crew, wore their headsets, their faces illuminated by the glow of monitors displaying endless streams of data. The press seats were already packed, a sea of laptops and notepads. Regulators, with their serious expressions and clipboards, were making their final checks. And there, at the very center of it all, stood Elon Marsden. You couldn't tell from his calm, collected expression, but his heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. To his left and right were Jenna and Cam, his two closest partners in this venture. Jenna looked sharp and professional in a navy blazer, the very picture of corporate confidence. Cam, on the other hand, was in his usual hoodie, which he'd pulled over a collared shirt, a small, almost defiant nod to their scrappy startup roots. Today was the day. The demonstration would connect a volunteer user, a brave individual with a spinal injury, to their revolutionary neural interface. Live telemetry would be broadcast on the giant screens, displaying the intricate dance of neural signals, the corresponding cursor movement on a screen, and the precise motion of a robotic arm. Cameras were positioned everywhere, streaming the event to a massive outdoor audience and to the entire world online. The press, the regulators, the world's most influential tech watchers, they were all here, all waiting, all ready to judge. The volunteer, a man named Leo, was settled in. The final checks were complete. Elon gave a slight nod to the operator. Initiate the session. A hush fell over the crowd, a collective intake of breath. The world held still. On the massive screen, a cursor was supposed to twitch to move to respond to Leo's thoughts, but it didn't. It stayed frozen, a static icon against a blank background. The hush deepened into an uncomfortable silence. Elon's jaw tightened. He could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on him. The code wasn't responding. 1,000 worst-case scenarios flashed through his mind in a split second. The ongoing federal investigation, the recent data leak, the crushing public possibility of total, unmitigated failure. He felt a gentle pressure on his shoulder. It was Jenna, her touch a small anchor in the storm. From his other side, Cam whispered, his voice firm. "You've got this." Elon took a deep breath and nodded, more to himself than to them. He swallowed the lump of anxiety forming in his throat and looked at the diagnostic screens. He knew the hardware. He had built it, piece by piece. He knew it was sound. This felt different. This felt like a network issue, a bottleneck in the data stream. Hope flickered within him. He turned to the microphone, his voice remarkably calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to have a slight communication delay. We'll be retrying the connection in 30 seconds. Behind him, technicians scrambled, their fingers flying across keyboards as they rebooted the system and rerouted the data stream through a backup server. Instead of staying glued to the console, a ball of stress, Elon did something unexpected. He walked away from the command center and approached the volunteer. He placed a reassuring hand on Leo's shoulder. "Just take a breath," he said, his voice low and kind. "We're with you." Leo, whose initial look of hope had started to fade into disappointment, managed a small, grateful nod. Then, Elon raised his voice, ensuring the microphones picked it up and the entire audience could hear him clearly. "This technology isn't just about cursors and robotic arms," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "This is about connection. This is about potential. This is about you, Leo. It's about all of us and what we can achieve when we refuse to accept limitations." The 30 seconds were up. "Let's try that again," Elon said, stepping back. All eyes shot back to the screen. A flicker. The cursor trembled just once. A collective gasp rippled through the dome. And then, it moved. Slowly at first, then with increasing confidence, it slid across the screen, guided by nothing but Leo's thoughts. The crowd exhaled as one. Then the robotic arm whirred to life. It extended, its metallic fingers gracefully closing around a small red sphere on the table. It lifted the sphere. The room erupted. Flashbulbs popped like a sudden burst of fireworks. The press was on its feet. Leo's face projected onto the giant screen was alight with a smile so pure and so bright it could have powered the entire facility. Elon felt a warmth spread through his chest and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. It worked. Against all odds in front of the entire world, it had actually worked. But just as the applause reached its peak, something else happened. Something no one could have predicted. The screen showing the telemetry data flickered. In the chaos of the reboot, the system had connected to the backup server, the very server that had been compromised in the earlier data leak. And now, superimposed over the beautiful flowing data stream, a new message appeared in stark block letters. FedNV satisfied. Record will be submitted. A new kind of hush fell over the audience, sharp and chilling. Elon's stomach dropped into an icy void. A live feed? A message from the investigating agency? Right here, right now? The joy of a moment ago vanished, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. The reporters, quick to sense a story far bigger than a tech demo, began murmuring, their fingers flying across their keyboards. This wasn't just a demonstration anymore. It was an interrogation, conducted in public. The regulators exchanged alarmed glances. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Elon stood there, frozen, the triumphant hero of one moment, now feeling utterly exposed, utterly naked, under the harsh glare of 1,000 lights. The celebration was over. The trial had just begun. What happens next is anyone's guess. Will this public revelation destroy Elon and StarTech? Or will it be the moment that defines them? The line between genius and criminal has never been so thin. Thanks for watching. If you were captivated by this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss what comes next. See you in the next video. He paused. Then he leaned into the mic. Yes, this has been monitored, and yes, we consented to transparency. Because innovation cannot hide behind secrecy when it affects the world. He paused again, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The silence in the room was a heavy blanket, thick with anticipation and judgment. Then he continued, his voice steady despite the tremor inside him. We stand before you today not just as inventors but as citizens. We welcome scrutiny. We welcome the tough questions. Because trust, in the end, matters more than any single breakthrough. And just like that, the tension broke. The room erupted in applause, a wave of sound that wasn't just for the technology, but for the raw, unexpected honesty. Cameras zoomed in on his face, trying to capture the emotion in his eyes. Out of the corner of his vision, he saw Jenna, her look a mixture of pride and relief. He saw Cam, a wide, relieved smile spreading across his face. In that moment, he knew he had made the right choice. In the weeks that followed, the investigation didn't just vanish. Far from it. It intensified in a way, but the entire narrative had shifted. The story was no longer about a secretive company with something to hide. It was about a bold new approach to technological ethics. The public, the regulators, even some of the most skeptical lawmakers, started to praise the move. StarTech Dynamics didn't just talk the talk, they walked the walk. They agreed to quarterly public oversight. They published vast, anonymized data sets for independent researchers to study. They even appointed a fully independent ethics board, giving them real power to veto projects. Elon found himself meeting with that same FBI-style agency again, the one that had turned his life upside down. He sat in a secure private room with the very individuals who had once sat across from him in his own townhouse, their faces grim and accusatory. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. As the meeting concluded, they stood up and shook his hand, not as adversaries sizing each other up, but as partners working towards a common goal. He saw the people behind the badges, the concern behind the protocol. He found the shared humanity. Something fundamental inside him began to change. The man who once believed that success was measured by building bigger, faster, more powerful things, the man who equated progress with sheer scale, started to see a different definition. He realized that true success, the kind that endures, wasn't about building things to lift yourself up. It was about building things that lifted everyone else up. It was about shared progress, not solitary glory. This newfound clarity extended beyond his work. He reconnected with Jenna, really reconnected in a way they hadn't in years. The frantic calls and stressed-out meetings were replaced by quiet conversations. They decided to take a weekend trip, just the two of them, back to his childhood town in Pennsylvania. It was a journey back in time, a pilgrimage to the place where it all began. He drove her past the old, slightly dilapidated garage where he and Cam had spent countless hours tinkering with their first wild ideas. He pointed out the small school where their mother had taught for 30 years, her legacy still echoing in the hallways. As they parked in front of his childhood home, the place he hadn't seen in over a decade, Jenna turned to him, her smile soft and knowing. "Welcome home," she said. He let out a long, slow breath he didn't even realize he'd been holding. In that simple moment, he understood. He saw the incredible distance he had traveled, not just in miles, but in spirit. He saw the man he had become, and the man he still hoped to be. He realized how far he had come from the boy in that garage, but also how much of that boy he needed to find again. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. Before he left the city for good, Cam returned to the loft for one final meeting. The space was mostly empty now, echoing with memories. They stood among the ghosts of their past ambitions. On a whim, they decided to take apart one of their earliest, clunkiest prototypes, a relic from a different era. As they unscrewed the casing and pulled out the old wiring, they started laughing. They laughed about the mountains of empty pizza boxes that once littered the floor, about the nights fueled by nothing but caffeine and impossible dreams, about the arguments and the breakthroughs. Cam held up a dusty circuit board, a grin on his face. "We built something pretty incredible here, man." He paused, his expression turning more serious. "And now, you're building something else. Something bigger." Elon nodded, a wave of gratitude washing over him. Gratitude for his friend, for their shared history, for the grounding that their friendship had always provided. Even when he was soaring too close to the sun, he knew Cam was right. The machine was built. Now it was time to build the community, the trust, the future. A future built not just on code and circuits, but on honesty and connection. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of the story. It's been an incredible journey, and your support means the world. If you enjoyed this, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Have you ever felt like you were all alone, fighting your battles with the world on your shoulders? Like you had to be the lone genius, the solitary hero of your own story? Well, let me tell you about a man who aimed for the stars but almost lost himself in the process. His name is Elon Marsden, a tech visionary whose ambition was as vast as the cosmos he wanted to conquer. Elon's company, StarTech Dynamics, was on the cusp of revolutionizing humanity with a groundbreaking brain-machine interface. Imagine a world where thought becomes action, where human potential is unlocked in ways we've only dreamed of. But this dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Whispers turned into headlines, and soon, a federal investigative agency was knocking on his door, suspecting his revolutionary tech had ties to foreign powers. The pressure was immense. The company he built from the ground up, his life's work, was on the verge of crumbling. His every move was scrutinized, his motives questioned. The world saw him as a suspect, a renegade, a danger. But the biggest lesson, the one that would truly change everything, didn't come from a courtroom or a boardroom. It arrived silently, late one evening, as Elon sat alone in his office. The city lights outside his window blinked like distant, indifferent stars. He was isolated, cornered, and the weight of it all was crushing. He pulled out an old photograph, a faded memory from a simpler time. It was a picture of him as a young boy, kneeling beside his mother in their garage, his eyes filled with a youthful sparkle, a pure, unadulterated passion for creation. Looking at that photo, he saw not just the boy he once was, but the man he had become. Over the years, in his relentless pursuit of greatness, he had built walls of ambition, walls of secrecy, walls that kept everyone, even those who loved him most, at a distance. He had become an island. In that quiet moment of reflection, a profound realization washed over him. He tore down those walls, brick by painful brick. In the silent confession of his own heart, he admitted something he hadn't said to anyone, not even himself. I need you. He needed his family. He needed his team. He needed trust. This wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the ultimate act of strength. The tech world, which had been watching with bated breath, was stunned by what happened next. The headlines started to shift. Tech CEO redefines transparency, one read. Another proclaimed, from suspect to partner, the Marsden turnaround. The narrative was changing, not because of a legal victory or a clever PR move, but because of a fundamental change in the man himself. The encounter with the federal agency had shaken the entire industry, shattering the myth of the lone genius inventor who needs no one. Elon Marsden emerged from the fire, not just as a visionary but as a leader who embraced vulnerability, who relearned the power of human connection. And then came the most shocking twist of all. Just months after that near-disastrous demonstration, StarTech Dynamics did something unprecedented. They filed for an ethics patent. Think about that for a second. An ethics patent. They took their revolutionary brain-machine interface technology, the very same tech that was under investigation, and licensed it under open-source principles. The technology once suspected of being a threat was now being given away, made freely available to humanitarian nonprofits with ethical oversight built right into its core. The network that was once a source of suspicion became a public good. The agency that had haunted him became a collaborator. Everyone expected Elon to retreat, to privatize his secrets, to hide his innovations from the world that had tried to tear him down. But he did the exact opposite. He chose radical transparency. He chose sacrifice. He chose trust. The tech world watched in utter disbelief. This was the same man who once famously said, "I'd rather die on Mars than live on Earth." But now, his mantra had changed. "I'd rather live on Earth," he said, "with the people I love." His sister, Jenna, who had stood by him through it all, put it perfectly. He built rockets to Mars, but found home in our hearts. And his loyal friend and colleague Cam added another beautiful truth. The final frontier wasn't outer space. It was honesty. So, what's the ultimate lesson here? It's a powerful one. Ambition is an incredible force. It can launch you sky high, pushing you to achieve things you never thought possible. But ambition alone isn't enough to keep you there. Love, family, connection, and sacrifice, that's the fuel that keeps you in a stable, meaningful orbit. When the world corners you, when investigations loom, when you feel like all trust is lost, you are faced with a fundamental choice. You can build higher walls to protect yourself, or you can start building bridges to connect with others. Elon Marsden chose to build bridges, and in doing so, he didn't just save his company. He redefined what leadership in the 21st century can and should be. He showed us that true strength isn't about being invincible. It's about being vulnerable enough to ask for help, to admit you can't do it all alone. So the next time you're facing a tough challenge and you ask yourself, what's the one thing that will keep me moving forward? Remember Elon's story. It might not be the thrilling blast-off of success or the roar of the crowd. It might be something much quieter. The gentle hand of a parent on your shoulder. The unwavering smile of a sibling. A simple text from a friend that says, "I'm here for you." Because when all the noise fades away, when the triumphs and failures are in the rearview mirror, connection is what remains. Life will always be full of surprises, challenges, and setbacks. But love, in all its forms, will always, always lead the way home. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this community. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more stories about the human side of innovation. We'd love to have you with us. Until next time, stay curious and stay connected.